everyone. If you want to be more involved in the show, please make sure to follow our account on Instagram at Therapists Out of Office.
We will regularly ask questions that we will answer and dive into in our sessions on screen.
We want to make this collaborative between us and you.
Thank you for being here and enjoy the show. Welcome to Therapists Out of Office. I'm Leora Gal.
I'm Maggie Lancioni, and we're both licensed therapists in private practice.
Each episode, we will discuss mental health topics that are both mainstream and taboo, from both the lens of a therapist and a human being.
We show up with humor, authenticity, and vulnerability as we get into the educational nitty-gritty.
So come on in, make yourself cozy, and welcome to your session
outside of the office. Yo, Leor! Welcome to session 4!
Welcome, everyone. I cannot believe this is session 4.
I know. This was so much better, though. Like, last session, we had some serious technical stuff. Today, we had technical stuff, but we were really able to figure it out, I think.
We are hopeful. We are not sure this will come out, so...
If you're here, yay! We did it!
We did it! And we are wearing the same matching sweatshirts this time.
I know. Washed. I cleaned them, washed them.
Mine has my dog's hair all over them, so we know that they're clean.
All right, so this session is titled Therapy 101.
All things starting therapy. We had sent out a question box for everyone on both of our social medias. And we got a lot of questions, a lot of really, really good questions. And we are so excited because originally we were like, oh, what are we just going to talk about? The intake or like the first session? No.
Yeah, we got incredible, amazing, interesting, dynamic feedback. I was like, wow, we could probably make this 2 episodes, maybe. We'll see how far we get.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll be able to finish, but
you guys have a lot of good questions because I think that when we think about therapy, or at least the evolution of therapy, we're like, well, is it for me? Do I need to have something wrong with me in order to be in therapy?
Yeah.
That is one of those questions that I always get from anyone that has never been to therapy is, okay, but I'm not like so far, off the rails here.
Right.
Do I really need therapy?
Right.
And I'm like, yeah.
Right, which is the very first question. How to know it's time to go to therapy, and who is therapy for?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the right time to go to therapy is, I think, whenever you're thinking about it. To me, it's like if you're interested, if you're like, oh, like I wonder what therapy is like, or if I wonder if it would be interesting to me, or I wonder what I would need, help with, if anything. If you're thinking about it, I think that that's the time to go.
Right. Exactly. Because if you're thinking about it, it's probably because you have something going on in your life that you're thinking, maybe I should gain an objective perspective. So when I say objective perspective is, for some of us that say like, I have friends and I have family and I can go to them and they can give me advice. That is exactly what you don't want when you want an objective perspective, because every single person that is close to you in your life is going to give you their opinion that is based off of the knowledge that they know about you, the knowledge that they know about them, and the knowledge that they know about whoever it is or whatever it is that you are seeking guidance with.
Right. And we're trained professionals. I think it's just a different, obviously, like you said, objective. And we can come from, a litany of clinical backgrounds that could be really specific to what you need. And so therapy is for everyone. That is, I think, the big thing here. Go to therapy whenever, and it's for anyone.
No matter where you come from, no matter what your ideas are of therapy, and look, and there's also different types of therapy, and I think we sort of touched on it once before. There is outpatient therapy, there's intensive outpatient therapy, there's inpatient therapy, there's group therapy, family and couple. I mean, so many different types that it really can fit anyone in any place that they are in life.
Yeah, very true. And what we do is traditional outpatient most of the time. We do once a week therapy.
Yep.
50-minute, maybe 60-minute therapy.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So going into what to expect for your first session during the intake.
Yeah. Actually, something that I just thought of is before, and oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm saying this because most therapists offer a 15-minute free consultation.
Oh, yeah. So glad you're bringing this up. Yeah.
Yeah. I do it. Maggie, do you do it?
Yes, I do.
I think it's so important as a therapist and as a client, of course, of having that conversation to even see if you're meshing with the therapist, if the therapist is meshing with the client, because you could be coming in for something that your therapist has no knowledge on.
Right.
For example, I don't know, Maggie, do you work with couples?
Sometimes.
Occasionally. But let's say somebody doesn't work with couples and you're saying, hey, I want couples therapy.
Yeah.
And that therapist is differently trained, then you're going to say, I'm sorry, I don't have that, but let me refer you to somebody else.
Yeah, for sure.
That 15 minutes is so important. And some therapists actually don't offer it, which I'm kind of confused about.
Sure. I think we can go into that, like how to find a therapist. So you've decided, okay, it's ready. I'm ready.
I'm ready.
I feel ready. I'm ready to go. I just don't know where to start. I think that that's a big one too. Is like, where do I go from here now that I've decided I would like to try this? And I think that for the most part, I try to say like, here are all your options. There are wonderful websites that you can go onto. There's Psychology Today. There's Therapy Den. You can even like do a Google search. And then there's also the back of your insurance card if that's the way you want to go. There's Facebook. You can ask around to your friends and family for any like referrals or anybody that they know that is a therapist, or I think that there's a ton of resources out there. It just could be a little overwhelming or not knowing where to start.
Exactly. And like you said, asking around. And something else that has been more up and coming in the past couple of years is Instagram.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Social media.
I mean, obviously Maggie and I are on social media. We're therapists. We see clients. I have a group practice. I have other therapists in my practice that I always love to recommend people for. But if you're finding somebody online and you like their content and you like their message and you like what they're saying, that's another great way of finding a therapist.
Yeah. And you kind of can look, on a lot of these websites that you can go onto, you can find therapists that do specialize in what you're looking for. Like there's little drop-down boxes where you can specify like anxiety, depression, motherhood, men's issues, LGBTQ. Like there's wonderful like options out there. You can really kind of narrow things down, which I think is incredible. And also, going back to what you were saying, Lior, like seeing if they offer those consultations. I say take as many as you can or as many as you want. There are, where we put bios up there, pictures of ourselves up there, so you can kind of get a little feel on how we write or what we're saying or what we look like. And I have clients that contact me all the time saying like, hey, you're the fourth person I'm speaking to this week. I have a few more that I'm going to be speaking to, and then I'll get back to you if I decide to move forward with you. And I go, that's great. Yeah. That's absolutely wonderful. Go out there and see what you can find or, what fits best. Because I also like to normalize that, it's not always like the first one that you find is the one for you. I want to normalize that a lot of my clients, I'm like their third, fourth, fifth therapist.
Yeah.
So I just want to normalize that, it might take more than one try, kind of like dating, right? What is the chances that the first person you ever date is the person that you marry?
Very true. Yeah. Probably very small.
Right. So it's like, remember, like, it's a relationship. It's a relationship that you're building. And sometimes, it doesn't work out, and that's okay. On to the next one.
On to the next one. And I think to go back to what our original question was, the
intake.
An intake. I know for me, whenever I have an intake, whenever I have a client that I'm starting off with, I always ask, have you been to therapy before?
Yeah, for sure.
And I wait for their answer. If it's no, then I'm like, yay, I get to explain everything on the ins and outs. And if they're like, yeah, I have, I'm always like, okay, great. What was your experience like? What did you like? What did you dislike?
Yeah.
And open that communication for them to be like, I didn't like that. My therapist just sort of sat there and nodded. And I'm like, okay, great, because that's not what I do.
Right. It's good to know what you like and what you don't like. And that way we can decide, can we fit? Are we a good fit? And I think I do a lot of that too in the consultation. So I think that's important too. Like when you do these phone calls, these 10, 15 minute, let me get to know this person, they're not sessions, little consult calls. That's a great place to like have that conversation of, hey, I was in therapy before. Here's what I liked. Here's what I didn't. And I think it's just a good general vibe of knowing like, do I feel like this is a good fit? And then when you get into the intake, that for me, I think is more, I always like to preface it like, I'm going to be firing a series of questions that I don't normally fire questions every session with you. However, for the intake purposes, I'm trying to gather as much information as I can so that I can make sure that I come up with some kind of treatment plan for you that is, best fit. So we go through, I mean, I don't know about you. I imagine that you go
Yeah.
through relatively similar, like the entire history and background.
Oh, yeah.
Like school, education, jobs, relationships, family members. I go all in. We go all in there. But I do also say, like, it's a lot for the first session. If there's anything that you don't feel comfortable with, you do not have to disclose it because it's your first time ever meeting me. I don't expect you to just jump in with both feet and trust me right off the bat. So it might take you a little bit. But I say, we go through a lot in this first session. It can be overwhelming. Put up a boundary wherever you see fit.
Exactly. And I'm so glad that you're saying this because in case anybody out here doesn't know, I'm an LMFT, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and Maggie's an LPC, a licensed professional counselor. And I always wonder, we had different training. We're both counselors. We're both therapists. We had different training, though. How do we differ?
Yeah.
And I guess in the intake, we do not differ at all. Because I always, my favorite thing is, and if you guys are watching this on YouTube, I always go, this is you, and this is your system, and I'm holding up my fist, and I'm going around my fist like the earth, orbiting,
rotating. It's so true, though. It's so true. Yeah.
Yeah, and I say, in your ecosystem, basically, is your family, your friends, your significant other, school, work, religion, whatever it is that makes up you, is what I want to talk to you about in your first session. And I always say something like, if we're talking about a time when you were 5 years old, and you're like, Leora, what the heck does this have to do with anything? I always say, I promise you, it does.
Yeah.
And you'll see.
Yeah. No, for sure, for sure. So that's basically the first session. Oh, also we go over confidentiality. We can't forget that. Ooh, it's a big one.
It is a big one.
So confidentiality, right, HIPAA, is basically letting you know that what happens in the therapy room stays in the therapy room. There are just some stipulations where that we are mandated reporters and we do have to report something.
Unless you may harm yourself or others.
May harm yourself or others. I also like to say if there's any like childhood abuse or elderly abuse or, abuse of the disabled. Or if a court subpoenas our records, which those are like extenuating circumstances.
Exactly.
Yeah. So those are the big things. So the first session for a lot of people can feel really overwhelming. So the second session I usually say like, how was that after you digested it for a week? It can bring up a lot. And lots of clients say like, yeah, I talked about things that I don't typically think about on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And something that I always say at the end of this first session is you might leave here and you might go, wow, like a weight is off my shoulders and I feel so good and I feel so relieved. And you might leave this first session and you might go, what the
freaking frack. What the freaking frack?
You might feel overwhelmed, and we'll get into this, the therapy hangover, but you might feel like, oh my God, I just unloaded so much. Yeah. And you know what? Either way that you might be feeling is absolutely common and absolutely valid. And as although we don't like the word normal, it is normal.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what therapy is like. It's a lot of unpacking. Basically, I always say, like, for the first handful of we're trying to get to know your entire life and all your lived experiences. This is not an overnight thing where you're going to be like, I'm fixed. And I mean, obviously, what does that even mean? But, you're not going to walk out and be like, I'm fixed forever. I'm done. There's nothing wrong with me for the rest of my life. I'm perfect, right? So, like, it does take quite a while to kind of get to a place of, unpacking everything, a handful of sessions to get into some real meaty work, I think, for a lot of people. So, that's what therapy is. It's unpacking, it's unlearning, it's relearning, it's learning skills.
It's growth.
It's change. It's hard, I think, for some people. And honestly, there are some weeks where it's like, this is terrible. And then there are some weeks where you're like, oh my God, that felt great. So, just kind of like you said, like, there is no, like, it's corny and cliche, but there's no right way to heal, and there's no linear path to all these things.
Roller coaster.
And I do tell my clients a lot, like, sometimes it gets worse before it gets better because the first handful of sessions, you're just letting it all out most of the time, or talking about things that you don't usually talk about.
Right.
So it does sometimes feel worse, but it does get better, and your lows aren't as low. And, you find a new baseline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next question, how to help people understand that therapy is healthy and normal.
Yeah. I think it all boils down to what Leora loves to say, communication.
I also love to say I love that.
It all boils down to communicate. Talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? It's why there's a stigma. We have to destigmatize it, and to be able and to do that, we have to talk about it, normalize it, say, oh, I can't make it to that, show because I have my therapist. Right? I'm going to therapy that day. Oh, sorry. Or I'm going to therapy during that time. Talk about it. Make it a normal part of the conversation.
Yeah. And what Maggie and I are going to do right now, right this second, is we're going to tell you guys that we are in therapy.
Woo! Yes, we were just talking about when we're going to do our next session here together. And I offered a date up, and Leah was like, oh, I can't do that date or time. I have therapy.
Yeah. I'm actually really excited for this. It's a very specific type of therapy. It's called sensory motor.
I know. I'm so excited for you.
I don't even know. Okay. So that's the other thing is, as the therapist, as somebody that knows of all these different types of therapies, I've never heard of sensory motor until another therapist, that's a friend of mine on social media, said to me, hey, why don't you try this? Because I really struggle with IBS and really struggle with nervous system regulation.
Yeah.
She said, why don't you try this? And I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
And now I'm so excited. And you know what, guys? I will keep you posted because that is only fair.
I'm so excited for you. I cannot wait to hear all about it. Yeah, there's so many different kinds of therapy. When I worked at a group practice, I was trained in sand tray therapy.
Ooh,
and
so cool.
I freaking loved it. I loved it. I did it for a couple years.
With kids?
No, not
with
even.
adults?
Adults, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, yeah, obviously kids, but not just kids. I actually think adults can get a crap ton out of sand play therapy. But that's a whole other, we can go into modalities a whole other day. Yeah. There's so many different kinds.
Wow. I would love to hear about that. We'll definitely have to do a session about this.
Yeah, we'll do a session all about modalities. That could be interesting.
Oh, yeah. All right. So, guys, talk about it.
Okay. Yeah.
Basically, talk about it.
Yes. Talk about it.
Open communication.
Yes. Talk about it. Share about it. Say it to your friends and family. Post about it on social media like we do. We're constantly putting out, content on, normalizing therapy, destigmatizing mental health stressors and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So how do both sides handle transference? So we have to, I think, explain a little bit about what that means.
Yep.
So somebody asked a question on what happens when you're in therapy and either your therapist or you, the client, has some kind of transference, which basically means you're looking at this person a little too personally, almost. This person reminds me of my ex, or this person reminds me of my mom, or I'm getting little, triggered in a way or heightened in a way of I'm not necessarily comfortable or overly comfortable or I'm overly comfortable with this person.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and there's a difference between transference and countertransference. So transference is when the client has that feeling towards a therapist, and then countertransference is when the therapist has that feeling towards a client.
Right. So on the therapist end, for us, if we start to experience countertransference, we look at our clients and we're like, crap, this feels a little too close to home.
Yeah.
For me, the big thing for us is consultation, I think. Supervision. Having colleagues that we can chat with about this experience and say, here's what I'm feeling, here's what I'm thinking. We don't give any major identifying information away about our client's identity. We just talk about the issues at hand. And typically when you're in these colleague consults, everybody is very aware, obviously, of HIPAA and privacy. So there is no concern to that. We just kind of talk about what we're feeling and we look for support and ways to say, how can I best support this client without allowing these feelings to get in the way.
Right, exactly. And to give you guys an example, in case you're still like, what does this mean? I talk about this all the time. I have such bad IBS. I have a slew of diagnoses, but I have a lot of clients that also deal with that. And for me, I work through that on my own and I see my own therapist so that I am able to see clients and help them through that. But if I didn't, for example, or I have a lot of trauma around it and a client came, into my office, she's like, I have a lot of anxiety and a lot of bathroom issues and all of this, and I couldn't handle it, that's on me to, like Maggie said, to gain supervision and consultation and try to work through it. And if I can't, let's say I'm really unable to, that's okay. I'm a human being. You guys are human beings as well. We refer.
Yeah. So basically with referral, and also too, yes, the client can decide too, this is too much for me. The client can say, I see you and you remind me way too much of my ex, or you remind me way too much of my mother. I'm getting triggered and I don't feel like this is actually working for me. Both parties can decide if it's just not you're not able to get your needs met. It's not going to be able to help you any further. We want to make sure that you get your needs met in therapy. And if we can't do that for you, we don't want to keep you just for the sake of keeping you. We want you to get what you need.
Exactly. Exactly. So how do you get clients to talk when there's nothing to talk about? Are my problems big enough? I love this question because sometimes people really struggle, getting the words or really understanding their feelings or understanding what's going on for them. And so silence might be beneficial in this moment. I will say that. Now, silence the entire session, every session, maybe we're not getting any work done.
Yeah. Yeah, I say silence is okay. I mean, I always say it's all right. Like, I think as a green therapist, it's like so anxiety producing to be sitting in silence because I don't know about you, Lior, but I just always wanted to know. I always wanted to feel like I had the perfect thing to say.
Yeah.
And I always could help my client through anything and everything, and I could fill all the space.
Yeah.
However, I recognize now, more seasoned, that silence is important. Silence is almost therapeutic for a lot of people. What I see with my clients is the silence allows them to gather their thoughts.
Yeah.
Because a lot can be happening in a session, and those quick moments allow them to kind of it's almost like an aha moment for a lot of people, which basically means like a light bulb like turns on. And they're like, oh my God, things are clicking, things are connecting, or even just a moment of reprieve.
Yeah.
Like I need to be able to sit and breathe for a couple seconds. And that is therapeutic. So there is therapy in the silence. But you're right. If it's every session, all session, that can be a little taxing and a little draining as a client and as a therapist trying to figure out where to pull from.
Yeah. And if there is silence in a session that I have with a client, I always say, okay, we're silent right now. What are you thinking?
Yeah.
What's going on for you? And something that, and I'm EMDR trained, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. EMDR. Yeah. Okay. I'm always like, am I saying it right?
Oh, please. I know. Some of these acronyms.
So hard. But sometimes when you get to, and maybe another session will go more into this, but when you get to a point where you have nothing more that's coming up for you in your stored memory bank and you say, nothing's coming up, I say, what's nothing? Is it numb or is it neutral? Because even numb and even neutral is a feeling.
Sure, yeah.
There's with the silence, there is something that is unsaid. There is something that is stored inside of us in our memory banks and our, nervous system that is saying, okay, I'm processing right now. So when there's nothing to talk about. Now, if there's nothing to talk about because there's literally nothing to talk about, maybe take a little break with therapy. That's okay too. But maybe also there's nothing to talk about because you're afraid to talk about something. And so we need to start small instead of what's your deepest, darkest trauma.
Right. And I have to say, 9 times out of 10 when a client's like, I don't have anything to talk about, we fill those minutes. We fill those 50 minutes. We definitely do. Because all I have to say is, okay, that's totally fine. Like, so just tell me a little bit about your week. How was your day? Did you do anything? Like, and as soon as you kind of just like, all right, you don't have to always talk about something groundbreaking and earth-shattering for you.
Yeah.
You can just talk about how your week has gone. To help with this, I do say to some of my clients, like, write down little notes in your notepad on your phone throughout the week that you're like, oh, I want to talk about this in therapy, or oh, I want to bring this up. And that has helped, I think, a lot tremendously with just like having something to pull from. Because a lot of times when my clients do that, they're like, oh yeah, I forgot that this happened. Thank God I wrote it down.
Yeah.
Right. So it can be really helpful. But I mean, there are going to be sessions where it's like nothing pressing, nothing huge is happening. And that's okay. That's humanhood, right? Like we're not always having something really intense happening, right? And like that's okay. That doesn't mean that like, therapy sucks and it's not for you. I will say, like you said, if it's, weeks worth of therapy sessions where you're like, I don't know, I think I'm okay. Like then you can reduce. You don't have to do once a week. You can step down to bi-weekly, once a month, and then increase if you need to. I mean, therapy is there for you to fit what you need.
Right. Are my problems big enough? I mean, it doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter.
We don't compare trauma.
Yeah.
We don't compare our issues or our problems or our concerns.
Yeah.
If it matters to you, it matters. That's what I say all the time. If it matters to you, if it bothers you, if it's something that's kind of like in the back of your mind, like, I don't really like this. This has been bothering me, whatever.
Yeah.
Don't compare it to other people because it's you. What you feel and what you think matters.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about what happens to you, but how it landed in your nervous system is what I always say.
It's so EMDR of you.
I know. Well, EMDR is all about trauma.
Yeah.
You could tell I've really been studying.
Yeah. So, overcoming trust issues when starting therapy. Time. I really think time,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of like with any relationship.
Yeah.
To gain trust, you need time and experience, right? You
Right.
need to give a little, like we were talking about in our friendship episode.
Right.
Like you need to disclose a little bit, see if you feel like you can trust this person that you're speaking to across from you. And over time, I think that those are the big things.
Yeah, it's tough. I always say, especially in the first sessions, I always say, you're opening up to a complete stranger.
Yeah, exactly.
Who am I?
Yeah.
I make that apparent. I understand. We understand. If you want to share everything and anything, hell yeah. Like, that's great.
Yeah.
And if you need to take your time, and this process is actually called joining for us, is we join with you.
Yep.
We build that trust, and we come to an understanding that, hey, I'm holding this for you, and I've got you, and we're going to go through this together. And it's funny because I don't know about you, but I always use we language.
Oh, all the time.
I'm never like,
always say,
you need to do this. I'm like, we are gonna.
I always say, what are we thinking? Or
Yeah,
what are we feeling? I'm so in it. And that's our style. That is our style. I will say not
Yeah.
everyone is like that. You do not have to be like that.
Yeah.
But I think when you come from this very collaborative approach,
Yeah.
you don't want someone to feel alone in this experience. We language can feel very joining.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Something too that you said earlier about time. I love that. And my favorite quote with that is, and I'm not going to butcher this quote this time, Maggie. It's time does heal all, but it depends with what we do with that time.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So we could say like, oh yeah, the time is going to make us trust. No, yeah, sure. But what are we doing with that time with our therapist? Are we really sharing with them? Are we really joining? Are we really connecting? If we're not, and there's like years that go by and you're with the same therapist and you still are not sharing whatever it is that you really want to share, that's not trust.
Yeah. And going forward with that, I think there are clients that come in and they say something that happened when they were 10 or 5 or whatever. And they're like, I don't understand why I cry when I talk about this, or I don't understand, this was 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And I always say, like, if you haven't processed it, then it's still new.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, even if it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, just because time has passed doesn't mean that you have healed.
Yep.
So that's a big thing. So, yes.
Absolutely.
Trust is there. It doesn't have to be right off the bat. That's totally fine. But you can get there over time.
Yeah, you can. Absolutely. Yep. Is there such a thing as therapy not working? Yeah.
Yeah. Because I really think that there's so many different kinds of therapists and so many different kinds of treatment.
Yeah.
I do want to believe that there's something out there for everyone that can be helpful. It depends what your idea of like working / not working means. Like, what does healed / unhealed mean, right? So it's like, you might not ever get to an experience where you're like 100% I feel nothing about this experience anymore. I'm totally healed.
Yeah.
You might never get to that place.
But is it tolerable?
Right. Is it tolerable? Is it at least, I don't know, it's no longer
sustainable.
It's not a 10 out of 10 anymore. It's a 6 out of 10. And that's okay for me.
Yeah.
Because some of the things that happen to us, you can never not have them feel meaningful to you. So a certain therapist and a certain treatment, that's true. It might not work for you, but I do believe that there is something out there for everyone. It's just all trial and error.
Exactly. And something that we always tell our clients as well is 20% of the work is done in the therapy room, meaning you and I together, that is 20% of the work. 80% of the work is you doing it out on your own.
Right.
Which is really hard.
Yeah.
That to me is the biggest challenge, because it's kind of like with anything, even with exercise or physical therapy. You go in, once a week, you see your physical therapist, you do your exercises, and they're like, okay, you got to do this at home. If you don't do these at home, and even if you go every single week, you're not going to get the same results.
Right.
Same with therapy.
Yep. You got to take it outside of the office.
Outside the office.
Okay. Are there different kinds and styles of therapists as therapy? Yes, as we've talked about, there are a slew of different kinds and styles. And it's all jargony, I will say.
Yeah.
We're not going to go too deep into them because I think we can do this another time. Like, we can have this in another session.
Yeah.
But there's all different kinds of styles, all different kinds of therapists, all different kinds of modalities and coping skills and things to learn. And so yeah, it can be really intense trying to find a therapist.
Yeah, it can be. And like we said before, there's different styles and kinds of therapy, but there's also different styles and kinds of therapists.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like Maggie and I are pretty similar, I would say. But there are more psychodynamic, psychoanalytic, a little bit more like the idea of like sitting on the couch.
Yeah, like a blank slate. Like
no self-disclosure.
Yes, there are therapists that don't speak a lot, that just ask questions rather than give feedback.
Right.
It really depends what works for you as the client, which is why, you know, it's important to assess that for yourself.
Right. Like what Maggie just said, whatever fits you, fits you.
Yep, exactly.
So what do therapists take notes about?
Oh my God. Okay.
The secrets.
Do you take notes during session?
So I used to.
Yeah.
I definitely used to, and I still do with every first session, but I do not take notes anymore because for me, I realized that I was writing way too much down, and realistically, I was remembering everything.
Yeah.
So I was like, why am I like doing this? It's taking away from like me being really focused. That's not the case for everyone, of course. Some people need to write notes, and that's absolutely okay. But in session, when I'm writing notes, it is notes about just things that are popping in my head that I want to say to you, or something that is just really important and I want to jot down and I don't want to forget. What about you?
I only take notes for the intake, like you said, because it's a crap ton of gathering. I do not take notes during session.
Yeah.
I think I did used to when I was like an intern doing my hours in graduate school. Definitely did. Just nerves, I think. Like I'm not going to retain the information, but I do not take notes any longer because you are like when you're really in it and really present, you just retain it. You just remember it. And also too, like the thing that I think is important to recognize is that we don't write down minute by minute in our notes what happens in the session. It's just brief overview. Client talked about relationship with mom. Client talked about stressors at work. Client talked about how they struggled to utilize coping skills. Like, I mean, just very... what's the word I'm looking for? Just broad. That's really very broad.
Good.
Not super specific.
Yes.
We're actually not supposed to, right? It's supposed to be short and sweet, couple sentences long, and just, you know, enough to trigger our memory if we need to reread it or to, you know, accommodate what insurance needs.
Exactly.
If they need your notes.
Yeah. Very vague, unless, what I will say though, because I do see some teenagers or young adults and even adults, if I hear anything about self-harm or anything that's really, really scary, really serious, I always make sure to jot it. I always make sure to write down that we talked about it because it is very important, you know, to protect ourselves and our clients that we are doing the right, you know, the right things for our clients and for ourselves.
Yeah. And so with this, we are going to leave you hanging. We're going to do a part 2 of Therapy 101. And in part 2, you're going to hear about therapy hangovers. You're going to hear about the ethics of therapy. You're going to hear about what do I do if I don't like my therapist?
Oh, yeah.
You're going to hear about, you know, can I ask my own therapist about their life? And what can we disclose? So there's a lot of juice. There's a lot of juice coming in the next part, or Therapy 101.
Get your tea ready. The consent tea. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out Boundaries episode.
Yeah. See you soon.
Bye. If you'd like to be a part of our community, ask us questions, be involved, laugh your tuchus off, and enjoy some hand-drawn art, don't hesitate to follow us on our socials, both Instagram and TikTok, at Therapy Gal for me, Lior.
And at Therapy with Maggie LPC for me, Maggie. And our shared Instagram at Therapists Out of Office. Write a review, follow, subscribe, check us out on YouTube if you want to watch, listen to our podcast on most major platforms. We cannot extend our gratitude enough. Thank you all for being here and for being a part of this. We love you.